Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we are back with yet another DK Topics guide. Now this one is going to be basically a continuation of a video I made a little bit ago. That video is called Which Azerite Gear Should I Buy? Mythic Plus Gear Vendor Blood DK Guide. That is kind of step one in this, okay? I made the video, that was still during Season 1, which, you know, even now we're still in Season 1, but Season 2 will be beginning very shortly. And I know a lot of people want my detailed opinions on Azerite gear. So, following the entire, the entire timeline from Battle for Azeroth, I made a video on Azerite gear very early in the expansion, and I was not very well informed on it. My opinions have changed heavily over time, and now I finally feel like I'm able to rank every single Azerite gear in the game, at least from 5-mans, okay? I don't even want to get into the raid pieces yet with all those new traits, so maybe we'll make a video on that in the future. But today, step one is looking at that video, okay? It's going to be a lot more detailed. Long story short, TLDR of that video was I recommend buying random pieces. I am still going to recommend buying that. If you're still on the fence about saving Titan Residium, I hope you have been saving it. If you're playing a character that is considered your main, something you plan on raiding, something you plan on doing progression on, whether it's 5-mans, Mythic Plus, even PvP, whatever, you want to be saving it. There's just no point in buying 385 gear now. You're going to get rained. 385 gear is going to rain out of the sky, especially if you're raiding. That's normal raiding gear. So you'll be upgrading those 385 helms that you have now. As they only have one, outer slot, they're all going to have two immediately. So there's just literally no point buying them now. So long story short, save all Titan Residium and buy random pieces first. The pieces are not that big of a difference. You might get the worst piece on my list, but it's still going to be better than just not getting one for multiple weeks extra. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go through every single item, and I'm going to tell you how I feel about it with Mythic Plus. I'm going to make kind of like a tier list, right? I'm going to show the best few picks. I'm going to talk about every single trait on the gear. And now that we have this extra ring, things are going to dramatically change from the way they were in the previous video, okay? But I'll try to give recommendations where that made sense. So unfortunately, I can't seem to get on the PTR, so what we're doing is we're going to be looking at it on Wowhead, all right? So not a bit haggard here, but this is the best we're going to get, man. Season 2 is coming out really soon, and I feel like we're definitely not going to be ready for it. So hopefully this will help you guys get ready for it. So anyway, let's begin. We're going to start with helms, okay? Again, I'm going to go through every single helm on the vendor, all right? This is starting here with this Soul Spun Cask, okay? And then going all the way here to this Overseer's Riot Helm, all right? So every item in the vendor I'm going to go through, okay? So we're going to start here. Helm of the Raptor King. This is the one that I recommend getting first if you can, okay? Again, I would not recommend, buying a specific one first out of the gate, but this here will act as my kind of like tier list. This is what 1 through 6 or whatever, however many helms there are total or however many shoulders, whatever. 1 through 6. This is how I would order them, okay? This piece I have as number 1 overall, okay? I'm going to tell you why, all right? Hopefully you watched the previous video, but you'll know I'm looking for Azerite veins and impassive visage on every piece I can get it. Things will be changing a little bit in Season 2 now because of the availability of stronger, that second ring is going to make our class-specific stuff a lot stronger. A lot better synergies, but these are still incredibly strong, especially for Mythic Plus. You got to remember, since this is Mythic Plus gear, most of this discussion is going to be about Mythic Plus. But Impassive Visage is easily the highest, throughput for Mythic Plus, especially in the game. You're going to get so much extra healing from it, and Azerite Veins is no slouch either if you can get it under the right circumstances. And then we have, the DK specific traits. We don't have a lot of options. The new outer ring has Bloody Runeblade, which is the new trait from Season 1, whatever, when 8.1 came out. I think it's a very solid pick. It's not the best trait ever, probably not one of the best traits in the game, that's for sure, but it's a very good trait. It gives a very nice haste proc. Don't worry about those numbers because we're looking at a very low item level. It gives a very nice haste proc, couple hundred haste for 5 seconds, and giving you extra runic power is definitely nothing to sneeze at. It's going to be a little bit awkward to maximize, but you really don't need to worry that much about maximizing it when it's between Bloody Runeblade and Deep Cuts. Deep Cuts is arguably one of the worst traits in the game for tanks. And I guess I would just never recommend taking it. If it's between this and Bloody Runeblade, you're always going to take Bloody Runeblade. Regrettably, this third tier is not great, like we talked about in the previous video. Marrow Blood one of the weaker traits mathematically, but it does help quite a lot in 5-mans where you're going to be relying a lot on the Death Strike healing. That is going to be your main form of mitigation in 5-mans, where in raids you're going to be looking to mitigate damage more. So this is a lot better for 5-mans, even though it's still not great. The other option on this tier is Incite the Pack, which not a very good trait at all. I mean, it gives mastery, which is definitely our worst secondary stat among secondaries, which are already weak. So it's also got a unique overwhelming power, which we talked about in the last video. I'd recommend watching that if you want to hear more on that. But that's a pretty good trait too. So overall, I think this piece has the best bang for your buck, especially with Runic Barrier, overwhelming power supporting traits, and now Bloody Rune Blade added to it. Makes it even better, okay? Number 2, last time I would not have recommended this one, but now I do recommend this one as number 2 overall in terms of helms, and that is because of Eternal Rune Weapon. And this is actually a really difficult choice for me. If it was my pick, I would have Eternal Rune Weapon on I would have 3 Eternal Rune Weapons for Mythic Plus, okay? The amount of strength you get is absolutely absurd, and the trait only gets better the more haste we get, the later the expansion goes, that is. So obviously eventually you're going to start getting easier up to that extra 5 seconds, which you could already pretty easily get to now if you kind of play a little bit suboptimally, spending runes a little bit unwisely. But regardless, having Eternal Rune Weapon on every piece of gear would be something that would be a dream for me. But on top of that, you also have Bones of the Damned, which is without question the best defensive trait on the tier, or on the entire system. Now, that's not saying a lot because most of the traits don't do a lot defensively, but Bones of the Damned is just free armor, and even though, the Bone Shield, extra Bone Shield proc is a little random and may, get clipped by, your runes and not great value, I still think it's a very good trait to have. So these two traits together seem like the trifecta to me. They seem like the perfect piece. The problem is the rest of the traits are pretty bad. So the fact that I'm saying this is number 2 overall really is just a testament to how much credit I give in Passive Visage and Azerite Veins. Unfortunately, Azerite Veins, isn't the best trait. It's good for the row, but it's not good overall. So I'm not that worried about not having it. But I am happy about Resounding Protection. Resounding Protection is definitely my second favorite pick, at least for now. I still yet to try out the new Icebound. We'll talk about that, but Resounding Protection is definitely a really good, especially for raids. I think it's even better for raids than it is for 5-mans, but any type of extra healing you're going to get for any content is going to be extremely valuable. So I would definitely recommend this piece because of that. The problem is with the Outer Ring, I really don't like this Shimmering Haven trait. I think it functions quite poorly, but mathematically it gives you what you want. You want health and armor as a Blood Decay. Those are good things. But I'd also consider Azerite Globules or even Earthlink. This is going to be a decent amount of primary stat, and right now primary stat is what we're looking for as a Blood Decay anyway. So really not a terrible inner ring, whatever, I don't know, ring number 3, I guess you want to look at it this way. It's not terrible, but it's not the best either. But I do feel like getting Eternal Rune Weapon, especially on this outer ring, is kind of a godsend, and you really want to do that. Number 3 overall is Soul Spun Cask, and we're getting into a very odd piece here. This is a piece that I definitely wouldn't recommend going out of your way for, but if you have it, it's not a bad piece at all. Again, it's got Bones of the Damned and Bloody Rune Blade, either one if you're looking for defense or you're looking for all-around prowess and Mythic Plus. These are great options. Then you have, unfortunately, Bone Spike Graveyard, which is one of the worst traits in the game, again, but you do have Razan's Fury, which is one of the better offensive traits in the game. So you can build a little bit more offensively, but I wouldn't recommend that because the rest of the piece has some incredibly good defensive options. It's already got Overwhelming Power, which we talked about in the previous video. Very, very good. This is not a terrible trait, Mastery and Leech, not a great trait, but this one is definitely one of the best pure defensive traits, especially on this ring. This amount of dodge is just really nice, especially for Blood Decay. We don't mitigate a lot of damage anyway as it is, so the fact that you're getting this much mitigation from a trait is actually pretty nice for Blood Decay. It's good for all tanks if you're looking for pure mitigation. And then on top of that, you have Gem Hide, which is without question the best value trait in the game, especially in this ring, the best value trait in the game if you're looking for actual mitigation. It's going to be up 100% of the time when you're tanking, and that's great. Extra armor and extra avoidance is nice, but I don't feel like that's a particularly useful for 5-mans, so I would still probably take in Passive Visage here. But regardless, definitely one of the best defensive pieces. Having Winds of War and in Passive Visage or Gem Hide on top of Bones of the Damned is nice, but I do think this piece is just slightly better because, Resounding Protection is not that far behind in Passive Visage, and all you're really missing there is whether or not you're comparing Shimmering Haven that much less than Winds of War, which, I'm kind of on the fence by, but this is definitely number 3. Number 4, I'm going to have to say great Helm of the Putrid Path. Yet again, we have Eternal Rune Weapon, so this is always, whenever you see Eternal Rune Weapon, it's going to be highly favored. We also have Resounding Protection, always going to be highly favored, but regrettably, the Outer Ring is quite terrible. Marrow Blood, again, it's kind of the lesser of two evils here. This trait is really bad, honestly. I wish it would get buffed numerically. Even after they buffed it, it's still pretty bad. I was hoping it was going to be good for 5-mans, but it's just too inconsistent. So this is not a great piece, but I guess it's got some decent AoE option on that. Maybe Azerite Globules as well. Long Strider, maybe some situational usage, and Strength in Numbers. Definitely don't like that trait. And then Helm number 5 out of 6. This is an interesting piece again because it has Cold-Hearted and Impassive Visage. We talked a lot about Cold-Hearted, but I've still yet to get a piece with it on it in live WoW or whatever. So I've yet to test it. I don't know anything about it. Maybe you guys do. But uniquely it has this Tidal Surge proc, which is actually pretty good, especially for Frost DKs, but I guess it's okay for Blood DKs. So maybe this is a decent piece for offense as you have, Overwhelming Power or Azerite Globules. But yeah, realistically, some of the worst traits, these two are absolutely garbage. And then, Bloody Runeblade is kind of, slightly above average trait, but really not a piece worth having just for Impassive Visage. We'll have to see how good Cold-Hearted is, but for right now, I wouldn't go out of my way for it. And then this is definitely the worst item. This is the Overseer's Riot Helm. Bones of the Damned is decent, but again, the Inner Ring here is absolutely terrible. A Mastery proc on this, absolutely terrible. Deep Cuts, worst trait in the game, and the rest of the pieces are pretty bad too. Ablative Shielding is okay, but I feel like it's kind of just a worse version of some of the other traits in that row. And yeah, your most inner ring has basically only utility, no offense or no defense at all. So that's Helms. Let's move on to Shoulders now. Okay, on to Shoulders, and just like last time, we recommended the Sitraxi Binder Pauldrons. That is going to still be my number one pick. The piece has actually gotten even stronger, again, just like on the Helm slot, than the last time we talked about it. So we're going to go through why yet again. And the real reason is Bones of the Damned added on top of Eternal Rune Weapon. Like we talked about in the Helm section, these two are the perfect combination. If I could have those two traits on every piece of gear, I would think I'd be very satisfied with my Blood Death Knight strength gains there. So Eternal Rune Weapon's already been on the piece, so that's great. And adding Bones of the Damned is very nice. Unfortunately, Bone Spike Graveyard doesn't really offer much, but I would definitely take Bones of the Damned all day. And then the secondary ring is actually pretty nice, whatever you want to call this. The next ring in life speed. We talked about this in the previous video, but this is I feel like this is pretty good. Haste is a great stat for Blood DK, and Avoidance never hurts either. But you also have Overwhelming Power, which again, this is actually better than people think it is for tanking. It seems to have some kind of internal CD on it. It doesn't constantly just lose stacks like you might think you would when you're actually tanking. So whatever you take here, really all three of these is good. Gut Ripper, obviously we saw insane value from this, especially on a fight like Gahun Mythic. But otherwise, all three of these are pretty good. And then you have really good traits on the inner ring, all right? We don't have Impassive Visage, but Resounding Protection is honestly just as good. And I'm really expecting Cold-Hearted to be just as good too. I'm telling you, I think this is going to be one of the best traits. I've yet to test it, but I would very much like to get a set with a bunch of Cold-Hearted together so I could try it. But yeah, Icebound Fortitude really has some great value as it is. So being able to use it more and extra healing from it is definitely nice. So this is definitely my number one. If you get Sitraxi Binders, Pauldrons, consider yourself lucky. Next up is Pauldrons of the Great Unifier, which is, again, very, very, very good opening rows. Eternal Rune Weapon, Bones of the Damned. I'm going to take those all day, every day, from Mythic Plus especially, so we're all satisfied there. Sadly, the rest of the rings are not the best. Ablative Shielding is a very good defensive trait, but, it's not as common. It's not as uptime. The uptime is low compared to some of the other traits. And then you got Heed My Call, Unstable Flames, not great, but both decent for DPS. But now this inner ring isn't as bad as people might think it is. Bulwark of the Masses is very good for 5-mans. It's going to have a lot of value in 5-mans. It's not going to be great for bosses, so kind of lose value on Tyrannical Weeks, whereas the other options that we've been talking about don't lose any value no matter what you're fighting. But then Vampiric Speed. This is one of those traits that you probably are going to sleep on, but I'm telling you, you shouldn't do it, especially on Explosive Week. This is one of the best traits in the game. Whenever anything you're basically in combat with dies, you gain a heal and speed. Now, when it's explosive, these things are dying so fast or so frequent, you're basically never losing this hot. The hot itself isn't the best, and it is going to override itself in those situations. But regardless, that's not a bad problem to have, you know what I mean? And the speed itself is somewhat nice. So not a terrible piece, definitely number 2 overall. Not the piece I'd be looking for, but not terrible either. Now this is another one of those pieces that's kind of got your stats are all over the place, your interest is all over the place. Again, Bones of the Damned, obviously a good pick. Bloody Runeblade, you know, we talked about my interest in that piece, that trait. I like that one. But Unstable Catalyst is actually a pretty solid pick. It's a good all-around pick. Again, primary stat, you just got to stand in the thing. It actually looks quite cool too. But then the secondary ring, again, kind of mixed bag here. A Blast of Shielding's decent. It's probably better for rating than it is Mythic Plus, though. And Gut Ripper, again, very good for offense, but again, probably better in rating than it is for Mythic Plus. But then you have Gem Hide, which, you know, if you're only looking for raw reduction, you're not looking to heal anything, this is going to be a great trait. This Self-Reliance trait, I mean, they kind of buffed it, but it's still, I'd still say it's the worst trait on this row, even compared to the utility ones. So yeah, realistically, this is definitely number 3. And really, it's only number 3 because, you know, you got some decent ones like Gem Hide, Bones of the Dam, nothing great. The other 2 pieces are much more complete. This one here, Kraken Shell Pauldrons. This is definitely a much better option in terms of, you know, the balance of the traits, but the traits are kind of overall weaker if you ask me. Bloody Runeblade, we talked about that, and you know, the outside ring isn't great, but you know, you're probably going to take Bloody Runeblade here, maybe Marrow Blood, but I think I'd probably go Bloody Runeblade. The inner, you know, whatever, the inner special trait, whatever, is actually really good with Meticulous Scheming. This is one of the better traits in the game for just the raw haste. And, you know, these non-blood decay traits are actually better than they look. So, mathematically, that one's a very good pick. So it's not a terrible choice, those first 2 rings. But then again, inner rings kind of get a little messy. We have Crystalline Carapace, which I feel like is just a better Blast of Shielding, up a lot more frequently. And it's going to be a lot more valuable for Mythic Plus as you're taking that type of damage more consistently. But then again, you're stuck with Bulwark of the Masses, where basically not very good for Tyrannical. Any type of single target challenge is not really going to be, you're not going to get any value of Bulwark of the Masses. So maybe you might even want to consider March of the Damned here. If you have this piece, it might be a good utility piece just to try to get March of the Damned. March of the Damned is actually a great trait for actual utility, but not very good for overall Mythic Plus. So that is number 4. Number 5 is Pauldrons of the Horned Horrors. This is where things start to really fall apart, although this is definitely the number 5th pick compared to number 6. Again, Bones of the Damned, really the next ring is where you really get let down. Marrow Blood's a mediocre option at best, and then betrayed even further by the second, you know, the whatever this next ring. Shimmering Haven, again, I really dislike this trait, even though maybe it's good mathematically. I really dislike it. I'd probably go with Elemental Whirl, just, you know, because they can stack on top of each other. So if you get the haste and the verse proc at the right time, that could be pretty nice. But otherwise, in Passive Visage, top tier trait for this. Sadly, not enough to redeem it. So I would definitely look at this as a mid, at best, absolutely, otherwise low tier pick. And then this is definitely the worst piece, as you can tell. All these random colors you see, these are not good traits. Let's put it that way. Marrow Blood or Deep Cuts, 2 of the worst traits. Bone Spike Graveyard, without question, one of the worst pieces. Trade Winds, absolutely terrible. The Mastery is absolutely useless. And then it doesn't really get any better in here. Winds of War, the dodge trait is good, but again, really want to try to get healing traits for Blood Decay, not just pure mitigation traits. And then, of course, the inner ring is the most inner ring. Self-Reliance, really, really bad trait for most Mythic Plus situations. So I'd probably end up having to take Runic Barrier. So this is definitely, I think this is probably the worst piece in the game now. I was really hoping we were going to get Dancing Rune Weapon on this, or Eternal Rune Weapon on this piece, because really the rest of the stuff is absolutely terrible. If you get this piece, sadly, I would have to say you're unlucky. But let's take a look something real quick. There's only one shoulder that actually has Impassive Visage on it, so that's regrettable. So really, this number 5 trait, you know, if you're looking for 3 Impassive Visages, you're kind of stuck. Might want to be looking towards raids. But yeah, you know, these 2 shoulders here that have the double, the really good pieces, that's really good to see that. So that's shoulders. Let's move on to chest pieces now. And now we're on to chest piece. If you remember last time, we talked a lot about Breastplate of Arterial Protection. Has a very unique trait on it. We'll talk about that again. But this time we're going to be starting with Breastplate of the Vengeful. I think that is going to be the best chest in the game. Now, before we even talk about chest, let me explain something to you. Things get really, really odd now after this second Rings edition, and I'm going to show you why. There's 6 items total. 5 of them have Eternal Rune Weapon on it, which I think is one of the most valuable traits in the game. The one that doesn't, Breastplate of Arterial Protection. That's the trait That's the piece that we would have recommended as the best item in the game for Blood DK before these changes. So the fact that I have moved Breastplate of the Vengeful up, I don't, it's just a really hard choice to make. There's no slam dunk piece here now that all of these things have changed. But if I was to pick a number one, I would have to say it's this one. Bloody Runeblade again, very solid pick, above average pick. Eternal Rune Weapon all day. I'm telling you, it's best trait in the game for Mythic Plus. And, not too bad. This ring isn't too bad if you're looking for offense. You got Gut Ripper. Otherwise, again, Crystalline Carapace probably going to be one of the best defensive, pure reduction traits on this row. A really good option here, and even a little bit of lashback damage never hurts. So that's pretty good. And then I'm telling you, Cold Hearted. I really got to see this in action, but I have to believe it's going to work out very well. I am excited to see it in action. So I think this has got to be number one. All right. But the fact that I'm not sure tells you that, realistically, 4 out of 6 of these are all really good. I would wear all of them. Then we're going to have Breastplate of Arterial Protection as number 2. I'm telling you, Bloodrite is so good, man. It's so good for Mythic Plus. It refreshes so frequently. I just wish it had Eternal Rune Weapon on it. If this piece had Eternal Rune Weapon on it instead of this freaking Deep Cuts ability, goddamn, man, this would definitely be my favorite piece in the game, and I would probably even go for this really quickly as a specific piece. But sadly, it doesn't, and you're forced to choose. Even if Bones of the Dam was on the outside instead, these two traits are, this is fine. This is a good trait. It's not bad, but you're really betrayed by Deep Cuts. Bones of the Dam's a great pick, but of course, Bloodrite, you have to pick Bloodrite. Haste, so valuable. If you ask me, I think Haste is the best secondary stat for Blood DK, and it is going to refresh very frequently in Mythic Plus. Okay, so very, very, very good trait. I think it's the best trait in the game. On any row, and it's the only piece from Mythic Plus that is on. I think it's probably only on one other item in the game at this point, and that is a World Quest item, which realistically will not be anywhere close to the power of these pieces. After that, things get a bit murky. Luckily, it has Azerite Veins to kind of keep it going. Azerite Veins is still a very, very good pick for Mythic Plus, so I would take that all day. And then that's where things get, this is kind of why this is number 2 now, is because, Self-Reliance maybe is the best option. I don't know. It's sad to say Self-Reliance at least will heal you for a little bit, but realistically, it's not going to ever help you in combat. And March of the Dam. It's a great utility trait, so maybe it's a good idea to take this just because, the utility is actually really valuable in Mythic Plus. That can be really useful. If you got 3 of these on 3 different pieces, this can actually be really good. So it's a good piece. It's got some home runs with Bloodrite and Azerite Veins, but, some of the other rings kind of betray it, so that's why it's down to number 2 now. And that really, if that confuses you, wait till you see the rest of these. Desert Guardian's Breastplate. Yet again, all of these are going to have Eternal Rune Weapon from now on. So, Eternal Rune Weapon, Slam Dunk trait. And this trait is actually one of the best traits in the game for actual DPS. It got nerfed, I think. I'm pretty sure it was overpowered out of the gate. And again, it was only on this piece, so it's pretty much impossible to get. But yeah, really, really, really strong single target damage trait, but it kind of confuses you because the rest of the gear piece is actually really well tailored towards actual defense. We have Crystalline Carapace and Gemhide. These two things together are going to dramatically increase the armor and the physical damage you reduce. So it's a great option. But you also have Vampiric Speed for maybe you want to use that instead of Gemhide, but probably only want to use that during maybe explosive weeks. So. Really a good piece overall. Again, this ring here is just kind of betraying you. You really, I don't know, I'm not really worried about single target DPS increases, especially given the power of magnitude that we'd be increasing it by. But yeah, you're probably going to end up having to go with Thunderous Blast just because Bone Spike Graveyard are so bad. So again, that kind of makes me a little confused on this piece. But the rest of the stuff are pretty good. Crystalline Carapace, very good piece. Gemhide, very good. And Eternal Rune Weapon, obviously my favorite trait. So this piece is probably, again, if they just kind of swap things around, this would probably be one of the best pieces in the game. Eternal Rune Weapon again, Meticulous Scheming again, another great haste proc. A little bit difficult to use, but you're gonna get it. 3 different spells is gonna happen all the time. So this is really nice. These two go together very well, especially if you can get them to proc on top of Eternal Rune Weapons. Elongation, that's gonna really help. But then things again get pretty murky. I'd probably take Overwhelming Power here. As I mentioned, I really dislike strength in numbers and some of the other options there. So Overwhelming Power, extra haste is always good. But then again, we got Bulwark of the Masses, terrible for tyrannical weeks, and a pretty mediocre utility trait. So yeah, regrettably, that is definitely why it's 4th overall. 5th overall gets even worse, unfortunately. Eternal Rune Weapon still out on the gate, but yeah, things are terrible here. This is probably the I mean, it's definitely the better option. Secrets of the Deep. I mean, this trade is just god awful, but Secrets of the Deep does not really interest me either, especially considering you have to actually collect the items. It can be somewhat difficult to do when you're actually tanking. And then we have pretty mediocre second ring. Life speed I think is okay, you know, like we said earlier. It's not a bad trait to have, so we'll probably take that. And then resounding protection is pretty good. You know, it's okay. It's above average, like we said before, but still not a home run trait. And then finally, this piece again, absolutely terrible. As basically, if this inner ring is terrible, the rest of the piece is going to be bad. But the big problem here is that you have your best two, really, in my opinion, the best two traits competing with each other. So you're going to have to take Eternal Rune Weapon realistically, and that means you're either taking an absolutely, like, really situational DPS trait or a pretty mediocre healing trait. So not the worst two combinations, either of these plus Marrow Blood. But then it gets really bad. Again, you're stuck with life speed here, which, you know, is decent. And then the inner ring is just absolutely terrible. So really, there's not really too many bad choices on chests. Like I said, I really want to try to have Eternal Rune Weapon on every piece if I can. We talked about how that can be complicated, but you know, 5 out of 6 of the chest pieces are going to have Eternal Rune Weapon, and the one that doesn't has Bloodright. So it's really a win-win. No matter what chest you get, you're probably going to be in a good position. So with that being said, I would probably recommend getting a chest piece first. If unless you have like a really high item level, you know, maybe like your chest is ready for something because of the raid or something like that, I would probably get this first. So ideally, you know, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about in-game now. Ideally, you would have stacked up enough Titan Residium. You'd probably be, you know, maybe a couple, like, you know, just a couple, maybe like a full week and a half away from buying one of the 415 pieces. That's your goal, to get a 415 piece immediately, regardless of what else is happening. So, you know, I'm at 468. We still have 2 more resets. I'm looking to be, you know, well into the 600s, maybe even closer to 700-800, depending on what happens with the raids and the other stuff that we get. But, you know, there's people out there who are into the thousands, and that's great. One way or the other, buy a 415 out of the gate. Don't buy anything else. Don't buy any specifics. Buy a random 415, which, you know, we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost yet. I guess you can, I think Wowhead's got the math. I couldn't get on the PTR this weekend, so I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, it's coming up fast, guys. Only a couple more weeks. So hopefully this will help you guys. A little bit haggard, the whole, you know, the way we're discussing it. But long story short, we're looking for Eternal Rune Weapon as often as possible. Bones of the Damned as often as possible, and then, you know, just trying to get some good traits after that. So I'm sure you guys will have questions. Let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll probably try to do one with the raid traits. I mean, just taking a quick look at them, they're really, some of them are really unique. I feel like I'm going to have to actually use, actually see them in game or learn more about them. We're getting a lot of new traits, like this one here, Treacherous Covenant. Primary stat is increased by 334 while you're above 50% health. That seems like that would be an amazing trait, while 15% increased damage while below 20% health. This seems like that's going to be a really good trait, you know. So we're going to have to try some of these out. I'd imagine the raid traits are going to be where it's at yet again, you know, especially combined with Bones of the Damned. This piece looks like a pretty decent piece, so we're going to have to try them out, but we'll do that, you know, in the future. So for now, that's the 5-man stuff. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, looking forward to Season 2. Hopefully you guys are as well. And yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.